And welcome back to another episode of the Real Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jacob O'Connor. Real Conversations is a podcast for those dedicated to doing hard things and living a meaningful life. This week's episode is another edition of the RC Rewind series where I share a previous episode that I'd recorded, one that I think is impactful, and it's been a little bit since it's been shared, and so I want to bring it back up to the top of the feed. So if you are a new listener, which we are growing, so I'm sure this is many of you, if you guys are a new listener and you haven't heard this episode before, it's one that I find impactful. And then last week when I was doing the Q&A Life update with my business partner, John Peterson, he was asked, what is one of the episodes that you found impactful, and to share a quote from it. And the one that he talked about was my interview with Sal Frisella, who's the CEO of Phorm. And so I wanted to bring that episode back up to the top of the feed because I recorded that December 31st, 2023. So it's been a minute, and that episode is one that is super important for a couple of different reasons. The first one being Phorm, the company that is St. Louis-based. They are bootstrapped, just locally owned by Sal and his brother and a third partner, Chris Klein. They just announced a huge partnership with Anheuser Busch, which is the largest beverage distributor in the entire world. They partnered with Anheuser Busch, which is a St. Louis company, to create a new energy drink called Phorm Energy. So it's a partnership between Phorm and Anheuser Busch. And this is an absolutely huge collaboration. I'm super excited for those guys. Makes me feel proud to be from St. Louis. So I wanted to bring this episode back up to the top of the feed so that you could hear Sal and his story and how they grew Phorm into what it is today. And it's just a remarkable story. Another piece of cool context to this is I recorded this December 31st, 2023. This is prior to John and I opening the restaurant. I was in a much different place than I am now, and I've learned a lot since then. And that episode was cool because I was sick as a dog, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to sit down with someone who I knew would have such an impact on you guys. And so I did this episode sick, and I went home and spent the rest of the day editing it. And instead of going out and partying on New Year's Eve or doing anything else, I edited this episode until midnight, until January 1st. And I literally was writing out my 2024 New Year's resolutions and goals while editing this episode while the clock was striking midnight. And it was super impactful for me to be that committed to the work, to the podcast, to the restaurant, to everything, and to be going all in at that time. And it's been 18 months of consistency since that point. But this episode is one that really sticks out where it's almost like this inflection point for me in my own personal life. And it was an episode and a connection that I found valuable for myself. So I'm super excited to be sharing this one with you guys. And I really think you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get into my interview with Sal Frisella, the CEO of Phorm. And welcome back to another episode of the Real Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jacob O'Connor. Real Conversations is a podcast for those dedicated to doing hard things and living a meaningful life. Today, I'm joined by Sal Frisella, the CEO of Phorm. Sal, how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to do this. I was here a couple of years ago and interviewed your brother, Andy. And then I was here about a month and a half ago and had Emily on the podcast.
Sweet.
And so it's nice to become in full circle and to get to sit down with you. So I appreciate your time today. So
well, hopefully we can bring some thunder today.
Yeah.
Try to bring some. Who's your audience?
My audience is people that are in college or had just graduated. So John and I are both 22. And so
babies.
A lot of people
Pups.
I don't know if we're babies. We're figuring it out slowly.
Well, listen, I manage about 400 young adults. I promise you, and I say it with the most endearing thing, you guys are babies. And at 22, what you realize is you think you know, and I can promise you, at being 42, you have no idea. And I say that as humbly as I possibly can, because at 37, I would have told you, man, I'm a really good businessman. I'm really good. I got it figured out. I got kids. I got all this stuff. At 42, I recognize I don't know shit. Mm-hmm. And those are the progressive steps of life. At 22, you start to become a young man or a young adult. You start to figure some things out. By the time you get to 26, 27, ego subsiding a little bit because reality starts to set in. Mm-hmm. You know, you got to start paying taxes and paying your bills, and you're probably out on your own. You're like, holy shit, man! Life's a little tougher than you think. Then you get a little, 30, maybe get established a little bit, get a little swagger. At least for me, a little swagger moving into my mid 30s. 37, life's good, kids, business, rocking and rolling, and bam, you get hit again. And I think it's just it's a good lesson to learn that, as good as you are in the current time and as strong as you might possibly think that you are, you have a lot to learn always. Yep. And I think that, one of our core values is stay humble. Sometimes I struggle with that, that humble kind of approach to life, because the second you think you have it figured out, life will find a really good way to serve you a nice little shit sandwich.
Yeah. Well, I think that our audience is, like you said, I guess, babies, and we're trying to figure out how to handle life the best in a way to set ourselves up for the most success. And so I think having people like you on the podcast that have been around the block more than we have, hopefully can provide a little bit of insight to that.
I would imagine if you're 22 listening to podcasts on self-development, you're probably moving in the correct direction. That would be my kind of roundabout guess.
That's been my hypothesis as well.
Yeah.
So where I would like to start is actually with one of your Instagram posts. So I'm going to read this, and I would love for you to provide kind of the context after I finish with it.
Cool.
I think this sets us up for a really cool way to tell your story chronologically. And I'll just start here. The best, worst day of my life. At least 100,000 hours between practices, games, travel, waits to get to this. Think about that. All of that a waste of time, or was it? Missed weddings, funerals, even my own college graduation because of baseball. My entire path destroyed in the blink of an eye. Everything I knew about life was between those white lines. That was my domain, my reason for life. It's what I thought I was destined to do. It was the perfect combination of life for me. Competition, plus my guys, plus an audience watching us. My happy place. All smashed because I wanted to crush the guy's face. And whenever I could have just taken the easy, safe route. That's just not who I am. I'm wired to play for blood. What was that?
It was a defining moment in my life, right? It was a post. I tried my entire, personal brand and really into my day-to-day life is, trying to take lessons that I've learned, most likely the hard lessons that I've learned, and pass them on to the youth, whether it be through a podcast like this, just like calling you guys pups, babies. Some people go, I'm not a baby. Just kind of, even you'll learn this about me. I'll dig things out of you. Like I say that to you and you almost find it offensive. And it's really just to pique interest and like understanding creates perspective, right? So that post, I broke my leg at a collision home plate. I was playing minor league baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals. I had built my entire life to be a baseball player. Every single thing that I did, every waking hour, I worked towards it. In the off season, I was training for it. Ground balls, fly balls. Time in the cage. Whether it was, no matter what season it was, I was training to be the best athlete that I could be, specifically a baseball player. And I had poured so much time, energy, and effort into that for one single mistake to completely change the trajectory of my life. And the reason that's important is because, it would crush a lot of people. And I went through that. I went through a great deal of depression and struggle. And I went through a stint of pain meds, getting through it, and alcohol, and figuring out who I was. Because at that time I was no longer a baseball player, and I knew it. And, but what I had to do is figure out and find out what lessons did I learn through becoming a baseball player that were, that allowed me the opportunity to transcend them into different parts of my life, and some good, some bad. And, those lessons were not without weight, meaning the discipline, the training, the time spent off the field, preparing to play, those lessons are transferable to life.
Hey guys, Jacob here. Real quick before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a quick second and say, if you guys are enjoying this episode, please make sure to share the link with a friend. You may have noticed I don't run any ads in the podcast. In fact, I don't make any money off the podcast. It's quite the contrary. Over the past 5 years, I've invested a lot of time, money, and effort into the growth of the show, trying to continually upgrade the equipment, bring on better guests, and just improve the overall quality of the podcast. So if you guys are enjoying this episode, or if you enjoyed previous episodes, please share the link with a friend. Sending it to one or two people makes a huge difference for me on the back end. As always, I appreciate your guys' support. Let's get back into the episode.
And we talk about that a lot here is, the reason the locker room or sport taught me life is because I understand the code of wanting to win. And then the building of a great team, like what does it take? What characteristics do you want in a teammate? What characteristics do you want in a team? How do you get people to commit to one goal, one mission? And all those things that create a successful locker room can create a successful business. But it starts with leadership within. And so, you have to take what was successful for me at that current time, and I couldn't just throw it out the window, right? Or some people do. But I had to figure out how to transcend it into my, my life that was coming in front of me. And I always say that, that was the best day of my life. And, if you take out getting married and having kids and doing those things, because, when I look at the life that I have now, it's full of a lot of things that I wouldn't have had I continued down that pathway. I would not have been a good husband, right? I would not have been able to be the same dad that I am today. I don't feel that I'd be able to impact the world the same way that I do today. I'm able in the position that I am not only to change hundreds of young people's lives from the standpoint of coaching them through life, building them into careers, but I also have the unique opportunity to be able to change tens of thousands of people's lives in what we do. And baseball would not have given me that pathway. And so I try to find the positive in all those situations. And, and I think that's a really good lesson in life is sometimes you're going to get served situations that you think in the immediate moment are not going to serve you. And you'll get down on yourself and you can slip into depression, or you think, your life's over, and it's not. It could just be the door or the pathway that opens up the life that's coming. And I didn't know it at the time, right? Because what happens is we're creatures of emotion. And so you dig into that emotion, and that's why you turn to alcohol and drugs and, partying. You try to escape it. But when I truly, genuinely faced it head on, I started to find, okay, what are all the positive things that I learned here? And when I go through this new door, what are my opportunities, and how can I take the previous lessons and turn them in? And so for me, that's why I say it's, arguably the best day of my life. Because as I sit here today, I'm a very proud husband. I'd like to think I'm a good example of a great husband. I try to be the best dad that I can. I have great relationships with not only my son, but my identical twin daughters, Isabella and Francesca. I love them dearly. I love going to work every day. I have a blessed opportunity to come in and impact and change the world. And so instead of worrying about the poor me, which a lot of people do when those situations happen, I try to think about the what if I take these things and transfer them into my new life? And, I've worked really diligently over the last 20 years to figure that out for myself. And, those lessons that I was kind of leading into the front side is when I broke my leg, I was even older than you. Think about that. So I was older than you, and my life had I just started to transition. So I was 23, 24 years old. And, and so things are going to happen in your life. And sometimes you're going to get knocked down. And when you're down, you're going to get kicked in the face. But remember, and unfortunately in social media land, life sometimes gets measured by this poor me attitude. But I like to challenge it and flip it on its head and say, no, everybody gets knocked down. And quite honestly, maybe not everybody gets kicked in the mouth when they're down, but the story of life is measured on how you get back up and go attack. And so for me, the book that I want to write, the story that I want to write is on the attack. What am I going to do after I got knocked down? Because just like any other great book, right, the chapters come with some adversity. And that for me was a big piece of adversity. And, it's conquer the adversity that people enjoy. And so my goal is to take that adversity and conquer it to the best of my ability.
I love that. And, fundamentally, the day after that this happens, right? It takes time, as you mentioned, to get that perspective and to have learned those lessons. But fundamentally, when you wake up the next day and you realize your leg's broken, your dream's in the line, how do you start to crawl out of that dark cave that it's easy to fall into? I
mean, the thing about me, it took a year, right? So I was in rehab, broke my leg, went through the journey, go back to spring training, go through all the things, get released out of spring training. Still hadn't even hit me, So 12.
You're trying to play still baseball?
Yeah. So you went back, basically you go back and they can't release you after you break your leg because then you get sued for workman's comp, right? Which consequently ended up getting workman's comp anyhow, but that's a whole other story. But they give you an opportunity to come back and rehab. Well, it just got to a point where at 24 years old, I'm almost 25, in baseball, you're either embarking on the big leagues or you're out. And I was always a grinder. I was never a top tier talent guy. I was a plus 50%. I was always in the top half of the locker room, but I was never the one or the two in the professional side of things. And, the writing's on the wall. It's clear. I know I'm going to get released at some point in time. And so, but when it happens, it takes a minute. It's almost like that accident that everything starts happening in slow motion and your life starts changing. And, for me, what was the dynamic shift is I was a St. Louis kid. I played in the St. Louis Cardinal organization. I worked out with Albert Pujols on the weekend or, in the off season, Mike Matheny, John Mabry, K-Rob, Ryan Howard. I was living my best life. I mean, it was everything that any young athlete would ever want to do. I was doing it. And one day, bam, it's not there anymore. The people who would call you and check in on you, they don't call you anymore. The cool factor of, going to a bar and going to the front of the line and getting at the booth and sitting at the bottle, like the shit that you see on TV, that was gone. And you're alone. And so that didn't happen. It's not like I woke up in the hospital bed and there it was. What happens, you start seeing those relationships start to fleet. they start to change. How people treat you starts to morph, and you have to start facing reality. And the reality was I was no longer that guy. And that was a tough pill to swallow. And that's where, alcohol really plays a role in some of that. And, me transitioning, that's where I had a dog. I went out and bought a dog, like a country music song, It's like, I'm going to buy this dog and he's going to save me. In a roundabout way, he did. And that's why I'm so sentimental to that particular dog. But it just took time. And, I went from, I don't want to say I was by no means the coolest kid on the block, but it was a cool life to live. To, I was selling, 12 months later, I was selling copiers. I was at Joseph A. Banks buying 2 suits for, $150. I started my job in September. It was 100 degrees. And day one, you got to go get 100 business cards. Like, I went from the coolest kid to Joe Blow in the matter of minutes, but it took a year. But it was just that mental change for me was difficult. It wasn't easy. But just like anything else in life, man, like you got to lean into the hard. And I just knew that it was another challenge that I had to get back on a horse and ride. And so just like any other tough situation, do the best you can with what you got. So I made the commitment to do the best I could with what I had. And yeah, that's how it transitioned for me.
So when you start selling copiers, that's such a dramatic shift.
It was different.
Do you have the vision of, I'm going to crush whatever it is I'm doing as you go into that job? Or were you selling copiers and then starting to figure out and crafting that vision for what you want your life to be?
No. I at that time, to my point, I was young. I don't know any different. I'm wired to compete. So no matter what it is, like you bet your ass, like I'm there. You're gonna know who I am, and that's just how I am that way today. If we're playing basketball, like you're gonna know I'm out there. I might not be good at basketball, but you're gonna know I'm there.
Yeah.
And so like in selling copiers, I just kind of looked at it as ways like, all right, I'm gonna compete. I'm gonna do the best I can and open up as many doors as I can and figure out where life takes me. And I think that's where my attitude still to this day is I'm gonna do the very best with what I got. And I know that if you show up prepared and you're willing to compete, those doors open up, and they open up for the people who are willing to do that work. And that's what baseball taught me, and that's what sport taught me really. Now, maybe not just baseball, but sport taught me in general. If I showed up prepared to play, then I was ready. Coach would put me in when my time was there. And I think a lot of people, they wait to play to prepare, and that's where they get beat. For me, I've been a big reader for a long time. I'm not the smartest guy on the block, but I believe that you can learn a lot through somebody's life in their work of writing. And so I read. And so I've learned to take other people's lessons in life and try to apply them to mine so that I don't have to take 30 years to learn those same lessons they learned, right? And so, with selling copiers, I learned, okay, it's a game. Like, how do I compete? And so I tried to find every necessary resource that I could to give me that competitive advantage. And that competitive advantage was just my willingness to do it. And, when I showed up, I was prepared and I was willing to compete. And still to this day, like my staff knows this, my guys know this, my wife knows this, my son knows this. If I am there, I promise you I'm willing to compete. And, the cool thing about life is it prepares you along the journey, and I try to take every day as a blessed opportunity to get better, to learn, to experience. And it gives you this thing called perspective. And so, as I sit here as 42 versus 22, I have so much more perspective now than I did then. And I tell you that because at 22, and we service these kids, these young professional athletes come in here all the time. There's a college athlete over there. I would have walked in that door and I would have told you I was the baddest dude in the room. At 42, I know that's not true. At 22, you couldn't have convinced me otherwise. Do
you think that was important, though, that you had that much belief in yourself?
Yeah, I think it's part of the developed skill, right? But I think the perspective didn't allow me the truth. At 22, I didn't know any better. And so that ignorance is bliss. It can be a superpower if you choose to use it that way. However, it doesn't mean it's true, right? Just because you tell yourself, you're good looking 5,000 times in the mirror doesn't mean you're good looking, right? It just means that you think you're good looking. That's what Chaz gets away with. And so the point being is like, how do we paint that perspective to the youth? Like I can sit here and look you in the face and you could be the best in your class and I can look at you and say, you don't know shit. And I mean it. I don't mean it to be rude. I mean it to be endearing. Like, hey man, you know what's cool about life? Learning. Like I have so much perspective in life that I feel like it's an unfair advantage. I have done all of the cool things that people want to do. And that's what I love is because most people are afraid to experience things. Dude, and I have lived a life of experience. And I mean do it all from, I've been blessed. I've been in private jets and flown across the country. I've raced across country in Lamborghinis and, stayed in the nicest hotels. I've done all the things that you want to do. I've gone to Haiti. I have an orphanage in Haiti. I've experienced life, in the richest of rich, if you will, which doesn't have anything to do with happiness, to be clear. A lot of young people here, we can go into that too if you want, or the poorest of poor. I've seen it all and everything in between. And, that piece of life, for me, that perspective is so rich in experience that I can walk into a room, and now knowing that's what creates confidence for me is because I have a better perspective. Back then it was a false perspective. Now it's very real. Like, I understand what it's like to be in the middle of Haiti, in the poorest country in the world. Like, I understand. Like, I can smell it. I can taste it. I've been in the water. Like, I understand. I also understand the other side, and so it creates, as this video is playing, like, I laugh because it was that this year I had the blessed opportunity to take my dad to go see his dad's grave, which he had never seen before, experience, and go see our race car race at the Le Mans race car, the Le Mans racetrack. And it's
crazy.
Like, I've seen it all, maybe not at all, but I've seen a lot. And, when you have both ends, it just gives you the really good ability to center your ground. And at 42 to 22, I tell you, go experience as much as you can and go see it all. Go smell it, go taste it, go try it, and figure out what you like. And I think a lot of times, specifically for the youth with social media in today's landscape, they tell you, you live this minimal life, or whatever. I mean, I don't even know what the hell people tell each other anymore. One guy tells you to go get rich and you can sell ClickFunnels and you never have to work a day in your life. He's a liar. The other guy is going to tell you that you should drive around in a van and live in the mountains and you're going to be happy. I can tell you that guy's a liar. So it's like, where is the in-between?
Right.
And you only understand it if you go experience it. And so for me, it's not about how much money can you make. It's also not about how much peace can you have. Life is actually best built in a little bit of struggle, actually quite a bit of struggle. Like getting in and figuring it out, because that's how you create confidence. That's how you create pride. That's how you create perspective. And when I think about what I love to do to young people is I love to give that perspective. It's like, hey man, like you don't know, you got to go try. And I think, and for the audience who's listening, Chaz is my video guy. He just happens to be here, but we ride in the car together and he asks me questions. I tell him about life. And I love that because I can help him in life. Like I can sit here and as a dad figure, it's what I love to do. Is I can say, no, don't do that. Go over there. I've already done that. It's not good. Like she's going to yell at you. Don't do that.
Yeah.
But that piece of life is extremely important because it allows me to take my experience and then pass it on. And then at some point in time, if I do it correctly, I can impact lives at scale. And I try to do that here with the youth. I try to say, hey guys and girls, let me share with you the lessons of good and bad and the benefits of both, because bad has benefit as well. In order to succeed, you must first fail. Fail is bad. It can also be good based on how you see it. But how can I help educate you so you don't fail as often as I did? And so sometimes you got to touch the flame. We all understand it. You don't understand it. The fire's hot until you touch it. But unfortunately, some people like to touch it multiple times. And so my job is to try to train them to maybe not touch it as many times.
Yeah.
Right. And so I like that about life. It's fun.
So for the person who listens to this and they say, that's it, that life you just described, that's what I want to cultivate and to build. In your eyes, is that a result of you outworking everyone? Is that you strategically seeing opportunities and being willing to take a risk? Or because you can't do everything at once, like you just said. What has it been in your eyes for you?
It's a little bit of both. You can be, I'm a grinder by nature. I've never been the most talented guy in the room. I've never been the smartest guy in the room. But my willingness to compete and my willingness to show up has always been unmatched. I don't care if I had 3 hours of sleep and I was hungover as hell. Like I'm coming, like we're going to do this,
Yeah.
So to say it's all talent or to say it's all hard work, I'm also not the dumbest guy in the room. Right. So like there's a good middle ground in there, where I've had to take those books, learn. I had a really good dad that I'm extremely thankful for, and a really good mom. I had parents that gave me a shot, right? That loved on me and cared for me. And I think that's a big competitive advantage in life. And then I was taught that like, hey, like in order to win, step one, you got to play. And I think most people won't play. And I had a dad who taught me that playing is okay and failing is okay. And the reason I love baseball so much is because I know and I feel and I understand the truths behind the lessons in life that you can learn is Baseball, you can fail 7 out of 10 times and still go to the Hall of Fame. It's a game of failure. It is a true game of failure. And that piece of the equation for me allowed me to really succeed in life, because I'm going to fail more frequently than I'm going to succeed. And that's okay. And, you don't have to be the smartest. Can't be the dumbest. You got to be willing to play, and you got to understand that part of playing is losing. Part of playing is getting beat up. Part of playing is not quite understanding all of the consequences, but then having the humility to go do it anyway.
We had a podcast guest where someone said, if you want to get hit by the luck bus, you have to be willing to play in the street. And I think that's one of my favorite conceptualizations 100%. Of that is you have to be willing to take some sort of risk and to put yourself in some sort of uncomfortable situation if you want those different experiences in life. So you go from selling copiers, and after that you make a move over to Johnson & Johnson. What was kind of behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing well, right? I took that same competitive drive, went out and started having success. I didn't know anything about the functionality of copier at the time, but I learned. And it's funny to think like we live in a world where copiers are almost obsolete and everything happens on the phone, which is weird, right? I essentially sold the newer version of the typewriter, but neither here nor there. It's one of those things that same exact principles. And I think when I look back at life, like a lot of people say, oh, well, I've lived a very, very, very lucky, fortunate life. But in that, no, I will never let somebody take away my willingness to show up and get after it. Meaning those same people that would call me lucky back then are the same type of people who call me lucky now. But what they are not willing to admit is that I was committed to being better than they were. I was committed to making more sales calls than they would. I was committed to preparing off the field so that I could play on the field better. And, that's a constant equation. And I still even see into our youth today, like the young people who succeed here at First Phorm, we teach them, like, you have to prepare off of the field and then be willing to compete at a higher level because, you're a basketball guy, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I use the analogy of free throws, and the reason I do is because a great competitive, March Madness game usually comes down to free throws, the missed buckets at the line. And, a lot of players will wait till practice so that they can practice the free throw. And I'm of the camp or the ideology that the free throw, it should be practiced before practice or after practice or on your time. And when you're at practice, you can execute that you've been practicing. Mm-hmm. And that way you can show your coach that when the game is on the line and you're forced to take that shot, or he has an opportunity to give you the opportunity to take that shot, whatever it may be, he chooses you. And I always approach the situation that I want to be chosen. And so when that choice is made, like, I want it to be me. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I am the undeniable option when that decision comes. And I've been like that since I was a little kid. And whether you call it competitive drive, willingness to win, want to win, pride, I think it's a combination of all of them. I couldn't say it's just one. And so I was able to compete at a high level and sell a lot of copiers, right? And so I sold more copiers than everybody else in my position. So I got promoted. And then I had an opportunity to apply for a job at Johnson & Johnson. They had a very, very selective process. Had a pretty good track record. Only had one job. I was competing against some older people, but I got that job and went on and, I don't want to say rinse and repeat, but pretty similar equation, pretty similar outcome. That allowed me to a great deal of success. So it was a fun ride.
And then at 28, I believe when you left Johnson & Johnson, you're 28?
Yeah.
So around 28, you make this critical decision now as we sit here. It's kind of really cool to see all coming to fruition.
Yeah.
To leave and start First Phorm with your brother and Chris Klein.
Yep.
Talk about that and what went into that.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of, I don't want to say same story, and I don't say this to be like narcissistic. It's just the facts. I was having a great deal of success at J&J. I was doing really, really well. I was making a lot of money as a young adult, young professional. I was 28 years old, made, $300,000-$400,000 a year, had a car, I had everything like, that the people would say, like, got it figured out.
Yeah.
But I wanted more. And And the reason being is, and that was my first shot at understanding that money was not everything for me. It's an extremely important factor. I can tell you I'd rather have more money than no money, right? But I understood that money was not the equatable to success. Now, I like to win, so I coordinated, and it's a funny thing, right? I tell people all the time, like if you're the best at whatever it is that you do, money is a byproduct. If you're the best roofer, you make great money. If you're the best concrete foundation guy, you make money. If you're the best podcaster, Joe Rogan, $100 million. So it's one of those things like, so I've always focused on being the best and let the money take care of it. In that particular time in my life, I didn't buy into big pharma. It's just what I didn't do. Like I saw what I did every day. I saw how, they sold you this thing. You're making people more comfortable, and this is how the life is, and this is what your job is to do, and better outcomes in surgery. And I did. I believed it for quite some time, and I still believe that J&J was a great company, and in the division I was in particular. But I just couldn't get down with it, and I wanted more, and I felt that I had more skin in the more fuel in the tank, and what my brother and Chris were doing at the time at supplement superstores. They were helping people change their lives. And it was cool. And they were successful and they were having fun. And it was young and it was progressive. And it was like one of these things like, shit, dude, like, I think we could build something cool if we went after it. And, Chris and Andrew, humbly, offered me an opportunity, to be a part of the brand. And, I had to take a significant pay cut to go do it. But again, like life, like I'm still to this day, I'm willing to bet on myself. And, I took that bet, which most people, there's only like 5 or 6 people that supported me, my wife being one of them. We went to work and, it didn't happen overnight, right? It's 14 years later, here I am. And it's been a lot of fights. In fact, 23 has probably been the hardest fight I've ever had in my whole life. But they're all, it's like any other fight. Like sometimes you get black eyes, sometimes you get bloody nose, sometimes you get some stitches. But it's the story and the perspective that comes out of it that, builds you the experience and the ability to look back on it and find the lessons and then, hopefully use them as competitive advantage moving forward. But, we set out 14 years ago to become what it is that you walk into today, which is a young, thriving change of the world. Here in St. Louis, it's cool.
It's incredible. And it is so cool that it's here in St. Louis. I always grew up and I was like, man, there's nothing cool in St. Louis happening. Nothing that I feel like I can really buy into. And then in 2018, when I found you guys, like, this is incredible. It's so cool that it's here.
Well, thank you. It's been fun, but it's like anything else, right? Like it hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
It's been, a lot of people, those same people that said, oh, you were lucky, you sold the copiers, et cetera, et cetera. There's the same people that say, oh, you're lucky you got here. And it's like, ugh, they haven't seen them. I'm losing my hair, I'm losing vision. I got gray hair coming out of my face and my ears. I got old man like ear hair because I'm old and gray, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And that piece of life, again, it comes down to is like, I'm willing to get in that water and swim, and most people are not. Mm-hmm. And that piece, if I could encourage the young person, is like, don't be afraid, because the real failure is not playing.
I have a few questions about those early days. One of them being, going back to my interview with Andy, he talked about in the early days, a lot of people thought that he was crazy starting supplement superstores.
Well, he is crazy, but that's different.
And I want your perspective as his brother, because I'm sure that you want the best for him in life. Did you think he was doing, what did you think the path he had chose whenever he started supplement superstores with Chris?
Well, I think there's like, there is, before he took it serious, and then after he took it serious, kind of like, BC and AD, right?
Yeah.
So, when they were doing it for beer money, it was a joke.
Yeah.
Like he'll tell you that. And I think, just like anything else that Andrew does, like if he puts his mind to it, the path will be paved. And, when he finally figured out that like, hey, this thing isn't just going to magically be something, he's going to have to build it. He's going to have to shape it. It started to grow legs and take life. And, he had to come here and move in with my dad. And, he went from being in college and had 2 stores to coming up here and, building out the St. Louis marketplace. He had to take it serious. And I think, on the front side, you look at it and you're like, hey, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And on the back side, you say, all right, dude, you're kicking ass. So there's like two perspectives, because I was literally in day one. And so, but I've seen all the stores. I mean, I used to go hang all the shelves and put the floors in and do all the, like literally set the counters and stock the shelves. Like I would do all those things with my dad and Chris. And so when I tell you I've seen it all, I've been a part of the entire ride. And the front side I don't want to say it was a joke, but it was a joke, right? Wasn't applying himself. The backside, I would say 2006, 7, maybe 7, 8, something like that. The times all kind of blur together.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things when you get old. Absolutely magical, because it's like, I know how hard it is to build a team from zero, and to watch him do it, and build that team from 0 to 5, 0 to 10 people. It's tough, man. Like, it's a grind. And like, most people are not cut out for that, because those people will, those early people, they're going to doubt you. They'll cross you. They'll stab you. They'll leave you. And it's a lot to take down as a young entrepreneur. And so when you watch somebody that you care for go through the journey, it's hard. It's hard to see. But then you look back, and that's what gives you all the pride. Mm-hmm. And just like any other great team in life, you have to have somebody who's just crazy enough to go out on the plank and get shot and get, and stand up for it. Yeah. And I think, if both him and I were blessed with a dad who would give us that autonomy and really guidance, say, hey, you need to be that guy. You go out there, you'll be all right. Like those shots, they're not as bad as the regular person makes them out to be. And because he had done it, he was able to give us that perspective, and that gift of perspective he gave us now gave us the opportunity to be here, and it's just simply being out there, and be willing to take the licks from people, quite honestly. And there's a post I wrote about this, there's a reason there's 50 people on the football field and 50,000 people in the crowd. Mm-hmm. It's not for everybody, and to be one of those 50 out in the field, like, you got to be cut a little bit differently, and they're going to call you crazy. They're going to call you crazy because you're training, on the nights and the weekends, and you don't do what they do. Well, as humans, we don't like people who don't do what we do. They're odd. Okay, well, you're odd because you're 22 and you have a podcast. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Does it mean you should quit? No. Fuck no.
Almost did a few times.
Yeah, you lean into it. You know what I mean? Because guess what? In 4, 5, 6 years, I don't know how big your following is now, but in 4, 5, 6 years, somebody else is going to start a podcast. We have 6, 7, 8 years experience on them. You've already been through, what sound machine and what camera do you use and what microphones do you use. You've already been through its experience, right?
Yeah.
So there's a learning lesson of time in life that comes in, and it's simply about going. Just go.
That has been one of the super cool things. The first time that I came here for an interview, Andy and I were sharing a mic that wasn't actually plugged in because I didn't know how to use it. We didn't have a camera. I can't, the audio is absolute garbage.
That's awesome.
And now we're sitting here, not that this is anything by any means, but to see that transformation over the last 4 years, it's been incredible.
You should have quit.
Right? Yeah. So one of the things that I think is super important for our listeners, because like I mentioned, similar age group to where John and I am right now, just in college, just graduated. You talked about those early days of going to join First Phorm, people thinking you were crazy, you having 5 people believe in you, one of them being your future wife.
Right.
And I think that choosing a life partner is something that is incredibly important. It's even more important than choosing the right business partner, arguably, because you're along for the ride with them. What advice would you have for that? Because I think that is something right now specifically that my generation is really struggling with.
Choosing the person you lay your head down with at night is the biggest decision you'll make in life. And I say that understanding how powerful my wife has been in my journey. And it's because on the days that I want to quit or the days that I'm struggling, when you go home to a place of support and security, somebody's in your corner, they're going to paint a perspective of kind of putting the warrior back out on the field. And the alternative is if you paint somebody or lay your head down with somebody who's painting a negative picture. I always refer to this person as Negative Nancy, who's always picking at you and bitching at you and pulling you down. It's too hard to go to battle every day with knowing that somebody's picking at you when you go home. And that will force most people to quit. And we see it here sometimes in young professionals, like somebody who's really driven and chasing their dreams, and they mismatched. And they found somebody who's not committed to the same journey. And it forces them to take a different pathway. And I hate that because, I know what happens behind those closed doors. I come from a divorced family. My dad was an entrepreneur. I get it. I've seen it. And I've seen it happen. I mean, I have 400 employees here under roof, and I have 10,000 in the field. So I understand the importance of a relationship. And for me, I found a woman who believed in me. And consequently, I believe in her. And she's better. She's more talented than I am, without question. There's no doubt about it. She's actually a better entrepreneur than I am. But it's one of those things that that's her support of me and allowing me to go be me has allowed me to be a better husband for her, which then allows me to be a better father for my children. Because very rarely do we argue or fight. And we might disagree on something, but very rarely do we actually have an argument. And that's not saying that, you should never argue with your spouse. I actually disagree with that too, because you're going to have difference in opinion along the ride. But when you lay your head down at night, what's that person thinking about you? And that piece, man, it's powerful, extremely powerful. And had I not learned the lessons of baseball, I had 25 different girlfriends along the ride because I wasn't a good man. That's the truth. I was in a different city every night. I wasn't the man that I needed to be. And had baseball taken me down that pathway, I wouldn't have the marriage that I have today. I would have been a different human. And that's why I go back and say the best day. Because had that not happened, I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't be here at First Phorm. I wouldn't have my children. And it's crazy to think that one decision is that entire pathway. I mean, these people would not have careers. They wouldn't have a job. We wouldn't be in this building. It's weird, right? Mm-hmm. And it's one thing. And it was literally, if you want to know what it really came down to, is I remember I was going down that third base line. I thought, I'm going to kill this motherfucker. And my intentions were to knock his fucking teeth out. That's how I am. And I didn't. And here I am.
Were you and your wife a good match off the bat, or was that you guys having an ongoing conversation about what you want to build and being aligned on that?
I think when you look at alignment takes time. She had her past, I had mine. She had her career, I had mine. And when you find a strong partner in life, what you have to realize is understanding that you have to learn to communicate very clearly in order to get on the same page. And the younger version of myself did not communicate clearly. In fact, a lot of young men, I would leave details out.
I've been guilty of that.
Yeah, maybe she didn't need to know that I went out last night. It's a little bit different today in social media and things like that. But I learned, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm just going to tell the truth. I don't care if it scares the shit out of me, if I know she's going to get pissed off or whatever the hell's going to happen. And quite honestly, if I can't tell the truth, I probably shouldn't be doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I took that stance. And had I not taken that stance, I wouldn't be here. And that piece of life's really cool because I can go home, I look at my wife, I got nothing in the closet, nothing under the hood. This is me, babe. And you build a genuine relationship when you can create that level of truth and honesty and transparency. And I think that's what allows her to allow me to go to battle, and consequently for her too. When she's at war, day to day, I support her. And cause I know that, that's my woman, that's my type of woman. So, that alignment is built, mm-hmm. Much like a character, or your character or your confidence, it's built. Alignment and relationship, it's built. And it's one good conversation at a time. And that doesn't mean one easy conversation at a time. That means one conversation at a time, whether it's easy or hard, you got to look at it, lean into it, and be willing to deal with the consequences of it. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that. And I always say, I stole it from the internet somehow, some meme running around, but speak the truth even if your voice shakes. And I've learned to do that. And it's not always fun. But if it's the truth, I'm not afraid to deliver the news. And in doing that, we've been able, her as well, it's a two-way street, right? I can't just deliver the news. I got to listen to the news. And both of us, adopting that mindset and that understanding has been incremental in our marriage and our ability to parent and our ability as entrepreneurs.
I love that. Jordan Peterson says that the most exciting life you can live is one where you tell the truth every day.
That's crazy.
And
I live both. So I understand. When I was 22, I was the other one. Mm-hmm. Now I'm 42. I'm on this side. And I can tell you this side's way better than that side.
And to tell the truth is a scary thing too. Like I don't want to just gloss over that, but like to actually live what is authentic and not just use that as a buzzword is incredibly scary.
Well, I think, when I did a podcast a few weeks back and I was talking about, just because you were friends in high school doesn't mean you need to be friends later on in life. You don't need to offer those people excuses. Oh, I've known him for 20 years. He's a bad drunk and he's just an asshole and that's who he is. I take him. No. And I don't do that. My friends know that. Like my lifelong friends, what they know about me is if they're around and like the truth's it's coming out. Like you're going to get it. And it's okay. Like they understand that about me. And when I was 35 learning the skill, they didn't like it because it's not who I was. I was developing it. But as I sit here today, like I understand like there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. And, when you cross that in with speak the truth, even if your voice shakes, that means you get no temperature checks on who's across from you. You got to say it and you got to be able to deliver it. And that part's hard, man. That part's hard. But having lived both sides of it, it's extremely important to create a genuine relationship through, sharing that truth. And so that piece of life, it's rad, but just like anything else in life, like the harder path's usually the one that you need to travel because it's the one that has a better story.
I love that. So to fast forward to look at this 400,000 square foot HQ, you said 400 employees, 10,000 out in the field. I think Andy's tossed out, it's like $1 billion company. Like to say all of those things as numbers and statistics is dumbfounding. But to go back to those early days, you've got a partner who's got the same vision with you. She's willing to build with you. And it's yourself, it's Andy, and it's Chris. What are you guys doing in those early days to start First Phorm, like fundamentally? Because I think a lot of people hear the journey and they see those numbers and they're like, that's it, I want that. But they miss what those fundamental early days and actions were.
Yeah, I mean, I what did we really do? We shot each other with airsoft guns and we did a whole bunch of stupid shit because we had so much more time. That's what we really did. But I think this is life. This is young. Like you look at it and say, oh, that's what I want. And you're not alone. This is how most people, when I was 22, I did the same thing. So this is like, I'm better than you. This is just how, as humans, we're wired. But the truth of the matter, like you want the God's honest truth, the journey is way more fun than the destination. Like I can tell you all of the stories that we've done, and I sent a picture to my brother the other day. We were in Vegas the first time we ever went to Vegas as like the three of us. And I know my brother didn't have, I don't want to say he didn't have a pot to piss in, but he lived in a very modest $200,000 house over in South County where we grew up. He drove I don't even know. He drove a 1500 Dodge Ram. It was all wrapped in supplement superstores. He actually wasn't wrapped that long because he's like, I probably shouldn't be at the bar in this thing. But, and he bought me a TW Steel watch. We went to this jewelry store, right? And I love watches. Like I have a really nice, I love watches. So,
yeah,
but at the time, I just didn't know. And we went to this store in Vegas, and I know that, Andrew bought himself and myself a TW Steel watch. I still have it to this day. He like gifted it to me as like a gift, and it was like $400.
Yeah.
And at the time, dude, I knew like he didn't have $400, and I didn't really have $400. Certainly not to be spending on a watch. And I remember the feeling of gratitude and awesomeness for a $400 gift. Like it was like the coolest fucking thing that I had received in my life. And I remember putting it on. I still have it to this day. And, those little pieces of life, because people see it, like you pull up our buildings. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like, but I've gone through so much to get here. But all those little stories along the ride, they've been the fun. Those are the stories. Those are the experience. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that we drank beer in the back of the warehouse trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do. You know what I mean? There's a guy, Brian Teach, he's one of our early employees. Like, I mean, I can remember Easter Sunday morning. It's like 4 a.m. We got back from a road trip, and we worked an event all day Saturday, and all we could do is get back because I was getting ready to sell my house. And we drove all through the night from Colorado. We landed, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I looked at him and I'm like, let's drink a beer, and we're like, sat there, we drank beer for a couple hours, watched the sun come up, and I went home. I didn't have kids or anything. And I think we always refer to that. Like those were the days. Like it was like, I mean, it was grind it out. I mean, I was gone all weekend and I'd show up, be there all week. And that's just what it was. And that's what it took. And that's also who I am. It's all the stories that I have and all the relevance that we have today and all the respect and you know, that we have for each other is all built on all of those stories. I mean, I tell people my first year I spent 92 nights on the road. I mean, 92 nights. So do the math, 365 days in a year. That means every fourth night I was gone. And I did it for 3 or 4 years that way. I put 63,000 miles on the Maxima, on this Nissan Maxima the very first year I had it. 63,000 miles. I mean, go drive that. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't have days off. Like I didn't seek them either. And I think that's the struggle that I have with some people in today's environment. It's like, you need balance. No, you don't. You build balance over time. What you need is aggressive. You need aggression. You got to attack and you got to go build, because the competitive advantage that you have over is I have kids, I have a family, I have overhead. It costs me way more to live than it costs you to live. I have way more liabilities than you have. You have all of the world at your fingertips, and the world is shaped by people who attack. And so when you think about that in life, like, you know, all of the things that we learned and all the skills we had was all in the attack, was all in the fun, was all in the journey. And everybody said, I want the destination. Maybe you don't. Because if you wish away the journey, it's where all the fun's at.
Sal, this has been incredible, and this conversation could go on for 4 more hours, but I want to be respectful of your time here. As we start to wrap up, where can people find you online if they want to connect or learn more?
Yeah, so I'm at Mr. Frisella on Instagram, which is kind of a funny story. Somebody has Sal Frisella, he tries selling it to me. I'm not going to buy my own, you know, kiss off. At firstphorm.com. But at Mr. Frisella on Instagram is where I primarily do most of my work. I'm at Sal Frisella on Facebook. I'm getting ready to launch salfrisella.com in the spring. So
nice.
It'll be changed. We're going to do some courses and some things around learning, actually professional development around young adults.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, fall into this little category.
Yeah, nice. For my final question, before that, you can find the podcast at Real Period Conversations online. I'm at the Jacob OC. And if you guys enjoyed this, please share it with a friend. It helps us grow. Sal, my final question for you is, looking back at this really cool journey you've been on, what advice would you give to your 22-year-old self?
Yeah, the advice I would give to my 22-year-old self. Man, there's a lot of pieces of advice. And I think I was very fortunate to get a lot of great advice from my dad. And I think, you know, one thing that I try to instill in my children is what I hit on earlier is, don't be afraid to fail, because the real failure is really not trying. And that piece of mindset that I was gifted, and maybe I wish I had it a little bit earlier, because at 22 I didn't have it. 22 I was more worried about being cool than I was worried about being impactful. And, you know, if you're worried about what, you know, they say, you won't do shit with life. And if I could learn that skill earlier in life, that what they say really doesn't matter. Because if you do and you execute, the stories that are told about you are way more important than the little jabs that they take when you're out on the plank. What they say, you know, how they judge how you act or what you do, you know, studying late, not going out, not partying. I'm not worried about what they say anymore in life. I'm worried about what I do. And what I do will directly or indirectly change what they say. And that's why I don't look over my shoulder. I have no rear view mirror. I look out that windshield and I go attack. And I try to go build the very best life that I can. And I know if I make the best decision that I can with what I have in front of me, what they say will take care of itself. And I've lived the last 15 years of my life that way. And I've really tried to progress that into who I have become. You know, there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. That goes for, as you know, you walk over a piece of trash, you pick it up. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Please and thank you. Character never goes out of style. And if you focus on the actions that you take in life, they're going to really dictate how they talk about you when you're not there. And if you worry about how they talk about when you're not there, you end up doing nothing because you're afraid of it, when really you're in control of it. And if you can control that variable, the narrative that's spoken about you when you're not in the room, it'll take care of itself. And so that's the piece, although it's kind of a roundabout way of getting there. that's a piece of advice that I wish I would have learned earlier. So the 22-year-old version of me.
That's impactful. Thank you for coming on, Sal.
Of course, I appreciate you having me.
Yep.
Hopefully I added some value to the listeners.
100%.
Awesome. Thanks, boys.
Thank you.